absolutely incredible news this week, which, okay, if you've heard me talk about AI before, you know one of my absolute favorite topics is the implications, the positive implications in the medical field with AI. This is just literally hands down my favorite area. I'm very invested in a whole bunch of areas in AI, building startups and stuff in there, but this is the number one thing that I'm the most excited about. And Microsoft has an absolutely incredible story this week that essentially they built a new AI system that diagnose patients 4 times more accurately than human doctors. It's been blowing up all over the news feed. Before we get into this absolutely incredible development, I have to tell you the second most incredible development in AI is actually a course that Connor has put out, the AI Mindset course. He has an incredible framework for thinking about how to actually change your behavior with AI models. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, there's this cool tool that does this, or there's this great workflow that does this, or we are on here talking about the updates all the time. And a lot of times people say to us like, hey, like this is interesting, but like, how do I actually change my behavior on it? Because new information isn't actually making me change. And so Connor has created an absolutely incredible course. His research has dived very deep into actually changing behavior. This is something that we've seen make massive impact for a lot of people inside of organizations, but also organizations themselves will buy this for their entire employee base. So if you are someone in an organization that would like to upscale your whole organization, check out the link in the description to the Mindset course. This could be something that could take your organization to the next level. And if you are just inside your company and you want to upscale your entire career, this is also something I would recommend. All right. This is an incredible course. Links in the description. But I got to kick this over to you, Connor. What were your thoughts on Microsoft's new AI, diagnosing patients?
Yeah, thanks. And thank you, Jane, for that shout out. Yeah, so the Microsoft study was actually kind of unbelievable. I had sort of like heard about it before it came out because I helped Microsoft out on a bunch of things, and they're like, hey, so don't share this yet, but check out this study. I was like, what? And then it came out and everybody was sort of like tweeting about it. So essentially, this is this Microsoft AI Diagnostic Orchestrator. Again, the names on these things, it's like MAI-DXO. Like, dude, just call it something. But point being, it outperformed humans, as Jaeden was saying, 4 to 1, or experienced doctors. Now, there are some caveats that I want to definitely get to, but just to sort of give you a sense of what they did, Microsoft did something that was actually kind of cool and actually pretty basic in a way. They didn't train models on new data, which is, Jaeden, remember like all the early Google models like Palm and all this kind of stuff that were like trained on medical data until they found out that just like these tools out of the box could figure these things out. It didn't necessarily have to have really specific training. So what Microsoft did was kind of cool, right? They tried to essentially mimic how doctors work, right? So they took a team of large language models, so including I don't know if it was GPT-4, GPT-4o, or whatever it was, Gemini, Claude, Llama, Grok, DeepSeek. They put DeepSeek in there. And essentially what they did was they let these models all talk to each other and work together just like a group of doctors would do, right? So, and they trained that on 304 real medical cases that they found in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is important because that's the kind of place where they put cases that are typically sort of like hard to solve, right? So, and they pitted this kind of group of models against 21 doctors from the US and the UK. Now, given the same challenges, here's the caveat. Those doctors were not allowed to use the internet. So you could say 2 things on that. First of all, well, that's not really how doctors would probably treat a hard case, but it is how doctors would often just work with a patient. Like doctors aren't typically sort of like, Googling, hey, this guy has a rash. So but that caveat I think can be a little bit also explained away by just the sheer impact or the sheer difference, the delta between how doctors did versus how the machine did. It was like 85% to like 20%, which is crazy. But the other thing I found really interesting about this, Jaeden, was that it was super cheaper with AI, right? So the AI was ordering fewer, less expensive tests, reducing overall diagnostic costs by about 20%. So again, this is not something that we're about to chuck into hospitals, anything like that. We can say, oh, well, the doctors didn't have this. But ultimately, these were experienced doctors doing what doctors do. And it's just more evidence piling on that I don't think people are ready to replace their doctors with AI by any stretch of the imagination. However, Jaeden, I would sort of challenge us to kind of think like, well, what if your doctor said like, oh, I don't use AI for that? You want a doctor that's sort of like forward thinking. So I don't think we're ready to replace human doctors, but the capabilities are unbelievable here.
Yeah, I think it's so exciting for me to see all of the different advancements in the medical field. You see like these x-rays that are able to take, pictures of someone's x-ray, identify issues based off of training data, and sometimes better than actual doctors. This is a really cool update that they've rolled out here. I think you're right. Like, obviously, I'm not just going to go to a robot and ask it to do everything for me, but I think medicine is evolving a lot. Like, just recently, my son, he got strep throat, and in the past we would have had to go see a doctor, go to a hospital, go get a prescription, go do all of this stuff. And now we just like are with our medical stuff, we just do a teledoc. They hop on a call, they go look at it for 2 seconds. It's like medicine is changing so much, and so I think adding AI into this is an absolutely exciting way to do that with the teledoc plus AI. There's so much more we can do, I think, with medicine to bring the cost down. It's a colossal issue in our country and probably a lot of other countries that don't have access. So yeah, I think this is very exciting. If AI can bring down the costs along with a lot of other innovations we've come up with, this is a big thing. I think people that are they're like, I've definitely heard this vein of thought from a lot of people where they're like, there's just some things that I will never trust AI to do. Like, it will never be my doctor. It will never be my lawyer. It will, like, there's like this list. And I think the list, to be honest, is getting smaller and smaller, like just based off of evidence of how accurate these things are. Now, if they're not perfectly accurate, if they have issues, if they hallucinate, yada, yada, like, obviously don't use it, right? But I think we're getting to a place where a lot of these tools are getting significantly better. One thing I did want to bring up with the study, though, that with Microsoft and what they did is they have an average total diagnostic cost per case that they publish. And so when you actually start looking at the results of like an accurate diagnosis using AI models to diagnose a patient, I will just say, like, the best result from Microsoft looks like it was somewhere around like $2,500 pretty much. And that was kind of their MAI DXO model. I think they gave it an $8,000 budget, but it used about 2,000, or that was the average total diagnostic cost. But in any case, like and when they had OpenAI's O3 model, it was at like $8,000 for their to get a 60 or an 80% accuracy on their diagnostic. So Microsoft is able to do an 80% accuracy for like $2,500, which is way better than, it's like miles ahead of everyone else. So they have some incredible innovation. But I'm just all this to say, like, it's still not cheap. Like, $2,500 is still more money than a teledoc that I got to pay, $50 or whatever to go call a doctor and talk to them about something. So, and maybe they're like, well, this is much more complex diagnostics and it replaces in person. And so, yeah, I understand. But all I'm saying is, like, this still is quite expensive. We have a long ways to go of, I think, making this cheaper and, of course, increasing the accuracy as well.
Yeah, a couple of fascinating things about that. First of all, sort of as you're showing, and Jane's referring to the budget that if you see sort of like the one chart that people are posting about this case, this is the chart that they're posting about just how effective it is. So a couple of things on this. First of all, I just think it's interesting that they got all these models to work together. It is, so they were using Microsoft, so I assume Copilot, although they didn't really mention it. They didn't really highlight that, but unless the MAI, and by the way, it's called like the Microsoft, AI Diagnostic, whatever it's called. But again, they use OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, X, and DeepSeek, and they had those things talk to each other. And those of you who are familiar with how large language models sound, and I'm sure you are, these things really talk like they talk. So there's no reason why they can't communicate and can't figure this out. But again, they did not have special training. I want to keep emphasizing that, because I think a lot of this is, well, are these models fine-tuned for this? Just out of the box, these things are so good, and maybe this is one way around this. By the way, I happen to think that this is probably a decent way of solving the hallucination problem. We've been kind of talking about this for a long time, but when you have models checking each other and things like that. So that's really interesting. On the whether people would use this or not, Jaeden, there have been a ton of studies, even from back in, I think it was like late 2023, that this, one of my favorite studies was done, which was, it gave people, and again, late 2023 would have been GPT-4, right? So, right? Or no, maybe was it just before? No, it was GPT-4, I think. Yeah. So, but even back then, right? So what you're thinking is, okay, so what happens when somebody wants to talk to a doctor? Would they trust it or anything like that? And what they found was that when patients asked for help or whatever, they were testing, can you tell that this is AI? And people, like 9 out of 10 people could say, like, yeah, I know that this is AI. But then they said, which answer do you think is better? And they just did this study recently again, where they said, I'm not going to tell you whether this is a doctor or whether AI, just choose between these two answers. And overwhelmingly, people chose the AI. Why? Because it's unbelievably empathetic. It behaves empathetically. But if you told them before, this is AI, which is a doctor, which answer do you prefer? People kind of preferred the doctor's answer. So I'm just wondering, Jaeden, if this is a generational thing too. Kind of you started this by saying, yeah, people be like, oh, I'll never trust this. But I think more and more in the same way people now order online, and whereas like my parents like only order the phone, it feels like a generational thing as well, right?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. One other thing that I wanted to also bring up, though, just to clarify, is the Microsoft AI DXO isn't a new model. It's just a framework. So it's built on top of
Right.
ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, X, the rest of them. So they're pulling it all together, which is a really impressive tool. The other thing that is interesting is like the results of this also are slightly, I don't want to say misleading, but they're sort of a little bit rigged. But all this to say, I think AI is incredible in this space, but to clarify for this one specific thing, the doctor, okay, so when they ran all the tests, a doctor had only 20% accuracy. And then their thing had like 80 to 85% accuracy. The cost was like $2,900 for the doctor's kind of like time and resources and tools, whatever. So $2,900 for the doctor. And the standard AI model from OpenAI was 7,800, which we mentioned was really expensive, but Microsoft was able to use everything and bring it down to 2,300, so it was cheaper. The only thing, so 4 times more accurate and cheaper is kind of like the headline you saw everywhere. The one thing I will say is slightly rigged on the doctors, because they actually didn't allow the doctors to Google symptoms, consult colleagues,
Right.
use any up-to-date medical databases, or call specialists. So like things that normal doctors would do, their hands are tied. It's like, based off of exactly what's in your brain, are you better than an AI? Nope, sorry, the AI is better. So I don't know if that's 100% fair, because if doctors got to use all their resources, then it would be a hard line to draw, though, because like Google has AI, so if they were able to Google stuff and they use Google, so I understand where it's kind of a tricky situation. All this to say, AI is changing things. It's making doctors more efficient. These tools are really interesting and cool. I'm excited for them, regardless of like the exact way this experiment was run and done. And I think this tool is a really cool innovation on Microsoft, and I'm pretty excited for it.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you're right about the internet access, and especially calling specialists, because one of the good things about the AI test was that they're able to even consult with each other. So, yeah, grain of salt, but also, it's not like it was close. It was like 80% to 20%.
True.
But yes, I'm sure doctors would be like, well, what if I use AI? Now, one of the interesting things is that sometimes doctors that use AI don't perform as well as, anyway. One of the things I think that this is just saying, and to end on this, is it's just highlighting the capabilities. This is sort of like a demo, or when you see like a concept car, it's like, this is what we can do. This is not what we are ready to do yet. But all this is also to say, if your kid is feeling sick, not a bad first step to take in terms of checking the AI. Listen, if you enjoyed this episode, but even if you didn't, even if you're like, oh my gosh, too much Connor, or like, oh, Jaeden, get rid of Jaeden, which is, I'm sure, what a lot of you are clamoring for.
Probably, yeah.
Hear you. But guys, listen, we love doing this for you. We always enjoy sort of like your comments and everything else, but what we love more than anything else is when you leave us a rating and review. It really means a lot to us. Maybe today's the day. So again, thanks for tuning in. Great to see you, and we will see you all again next time.